I was standing at my kitchen window when I saw the silver Honda slow down on the county road, then pull to a stop in front of our gate. I knew that car. My sister Vanessa. 3 years of silence, and there she was, parked at the edge of my driveway, phone pressed to her ear, crying so hard her shoulders shook. I watched her stare at the house. Our house. The one my husband Derek built with reclaimed wood and calloused hands. The one my father said we'd never afford. 3 years ago, he looked me in the eye and said the words that changed everything. Those words cost him his store, his standing in this town, and both his daughters. But what happened at the fundraiser? That's the part that still keeps Macon talking. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. I'm Sarah, 32, a CPA who spent 8 years doing my family's books for free. This is the story of what happened when they handed my sister $100,000 for her wedding and told me I didn't deserve a cent. If you've ever poured yourself into people who couldn't see your value, stay for this one. Drop a comment and subscribe. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, in a yellow clapboard house 3 blocks from Main Street, where my father Richard ran Henderson Hardware for 22 years. He opened it with borrowed money from his parents when I was 10. My mother Janet quit nursing to run the register, and for 2 decades that store was everything. Our income, our identity, our Sunday dinner conversation. I started doing the books when I was 24, fresh off my CPA exam. Dad's old accountant retired. Hiring a replacement would cost $45,000 a year. I said I'd handle it for free. I told myself it was temporary. That was 8 years ago. Every quarter I balanced the ledger, filed the taxes, reconciled the vendor invoices, managed payroll for 3 part-time employees. I caught a $14,000 billing error from a lumber supplier in my second year. I renegotiated the insurance policy and saved them $6,000 annually. Nobody threw a party. Nobody said thank you. The closest I got was my father nodding at the quarterly report and saying, "Looks right." My sister Vanessa was 3 years younger. She worked at a boutique on Mulberry Street, the kind of place that sold candles for $40 and scarves imported from Portugal. Vanessa was beautiful, charming, photogenic. She was the one in the family Christmas card, the one my mother brought to church luncheons, the one whose engagement photo went on the mantle before the ring was even sized. I was the one with a filing cabinet in my spare bedroom and a spreadsheet open on Christmas morning. I didn't resent Vanessa then. I resented myself for believing that if I just kept the numbers clean, the ledger between us would eventually balance. Vanessa got engaged on a Saturday in April. Bradley Parker, 31, a sales manager at the Honda dealership on Route 41. He drove a leased SUV and wore watches that cost more than my monthly rent. I didn't dislike Bradley. I didn't know him well enough to dislike him. What I knew? He tipped well, talked fast, and had an opinion about everything except his own spending habits. The engagement dinner was at my parents' house. Pot roast, Diane's good china, a bottle of champagne that cost more than the roast. Vanessa held out her hand so everyone could see the ring. 2 carats. Bradley beamed like he'd won something. My father carved the roast. My mother kept refilling Vanessa's glass. I sat at the end of the table and ate quietly. Vanessa started talking about the wedding, Lake Sinclair venue, 200 guests, live band, custom dress from a designer in Atlanta, orchids flown in from Ecuador. "We're looking at 80,000, Bradley said, like he was quoting a car price. Maybe more with the upgrades. My parents exchanged a look. Not worry, not concern. Something else. The look of people who've already made a decision and are just waiting for the right moment to announce it. I set down my fork. Not because I suspected anything. Because the room had shifted. The air was different. There's a kind of silence that's louder than speech. It sits between people who know something you don't. I'd been doing books long enough to recognize when the numbers didn't add up. Something was coming. I just didn't know it would land on me. My father set down the carving knife, wiped his hands on the cloth napkin, cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he said, looking at my mother. Janet nodded. We're giving Vanessa $100,000 for the wedding. She deserves the best start. The table went quiet. 100,000. Not a loan. A gift. Vanessa squealed. Bradley shook my father's hand. Janet teared up and pulled Vanessa into a hug. I sat there doing the math I couldn't stop doing. $100,000. That was more than double the annual profit of Henderson Hardware. That was more than I'd saved in my entire career. That was 2 years of the bookkeeping I'd done for them. For free. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Derek and I have been talking about getting married too, I said. Nothing big. Maybe a small ceremony at the... My father cut me off. He looked right at me. Not past me, not through me. At me. You don't deserve any help. Just like that. Delivered like a closing statement. He kept going. Derek doesn't have a real career. His family went bankrupt. I'm not throwing good money at a mistake. Nobody flinched. Vanessa studied her ring. Bradley sipped his champagne. Janet folded her napkin into a perfect rectangle and said nothing. I picked up my fork, set it down again, stood up. Okay, I said. Nothing else. I carried my plate to the kitchen, rinsed it, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. I walked to the front door, put on my coat, and drove home to the apartment I shared with the man my father called a mistake. That was the last meal I ate in that house. Janet called the next morning at 7:15. I was at my desk reviewing a client's quarterly returns. Your father didn't mean it like that, she said. No hello. No how are you. Just damage control before coffee. He's worried about you, Sarah. Derek is sweet. He really is. But he doesn't have... stability. I let the word hang. Stability. My mother married a man who borrowed $40,000 from his parents, nearly lost it all in the first year, and spent 2 decades 1 bad quarter away from closing. Stability was a word she used like a shield, pointing it at everyone else so she wouldn't have to look at her own choices. I appreciate the concern, I said. Is there anything else? Don't be like that. We're family. Then treat me like it. She didn't have a response for that. I hung up and sat in the quiet for a long time. Here's what I understood that morning, sitting at my desk with the Georgia sun cutting through the blinds. My father's refusal wasn't about Derek. Derek was the excuse. The real issue was control. My father needed the world to follow his blueprint: steady job, safe marriage, predictable returns. I'd followed it for 8 years, keeping his books, managing his risk. But the moment I chose something he hadn't approved, I went from asset to liability. And you don't invest in liabilities. My mother was different but the same. She gave up nursing to raise us. When I built my own career, I became proof that her sacrifice was optional. Vanessa, who married young, stayed close, needed them, made Janet's choices feel inevitable. I made them feel voluntary. They weren't punishing me for choosing Derek. They were punishing me for proving they'd had a choice all along. Vanessa's engagement party was 3 weeks later, at the house, 50 people, catered. I helped organize it because that's what I did. I solved problems. I ordered the flowers from Patton's Florals, coordinated the platters from Wilson's BBQ, printed the seating cards on my home printer at 11 the night before. It cost me $212 and 9 hours of work. Nobody asked me to. Nobody had to. I showed up early, set up the tables, hung the garland, iced the champagne. When the guests arrived, I blended into the kitchen the way I always did, the person making sure the night ran smooth while everyone else enjoyed it. Janet stood up to toast. She thanked everyone who matters for being there for Vanessa. She named the caterer. She named the florist. She named Bradley's parents, who'd driven from Savannah. She did not name me. Then she said it. We can only pour our hearts into one celebration in this family. She looked at me when she said it. Not with malice. With something worse, certainty. Like it was obvious. Like I should have already known my place. Bradley made a joke about the sister who crunches the numbers. Vanessa laughed. Richard laughed. The room laughed. I stood in the kitchen I'd decorated, holding a champagne flute I'd paid for, and something clicked. Not broke. Clicked. Like a lock engaging. I had been volunteering for my own erasure. Every flower I arranged, every invoice I filed, every free hour I gave. I was building the scaffolding for a family that didn't include me. That night, I drove home and did what I do best. I opened a blank spreadsheet and started running numbers. Not theirs. Mine. Derek was on the couch sanding a piece of walnut when I walked in. He could tell by the way I set my keys down. "How bad?" he asked. I told him everything. The toast. The exclusion. The laughter. The line about one celebration. He set down the sandpaper. Derek's family went bankrupt when he was 16. His father's business partner emptied the operating account and vanished to Arizona. They lost the house, the trucks, the business, everything but each other. Derek dropped out junior year, got his GED at night, and spent the next decade building his way back one job site at a time. He understood financial betrayal the way a burn survivor understands fire, not as a concept, but as a scar. "Whatever you need," he said. "But I want you to hear something. You've been carrying their weight for free. That's not what family does. That's what employees do. Except, employees get paid." I sat down next to him. I told him my two decisions. First, I was writing a formal resignation from Henderson Hardware's bookkeeping. Not an email. A letter. Typed, printed, signed. I'm a CPA. I know how to close an account. Second, I was done attending family events. Not with a fight, not with a speech. Just done. Derek nodded. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He picked the walnut back up and started sanding again. "Then we'll figure the rest out together." That was it. No grand gesture, no dramatic vow. Just a man with sawdust on his hands telling me he wasn't going anywhere. I wrote the letter that night. Professional letterhead. 3 paragraphs. Effective immediately. I didn't slam the door. I just stopped opening it. I hand-delivered the letter to Henderson Hardware on a Tuesday morning. The bell above the door chimed the same way it had since I was 10. Richard was behind the counter sorting lag bolts into bins. I set the envelope on the glass. "What's this?" he said. "My resignation from the bookkeeping. Effective immediately. Everything's current through this quarter." He opened it, read it. His face went from confused to red in about 4 seconds. "After everything we've done for you?" I'd been waiting for that line. "What have you done for me, Dad? Specifically?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because the answer, the honest one, was that I'd been doing for them. 8 years of doing. And the return on my investment was a seat at the end of the table and a $100,000 lesson in where I ranked. Janet called that evening. "You're making a terrible mistake. When Derek leaves you with nothing, don't come crawling back." "I won't," I said. And I meant it with every cell in my body. I didn't block their numbers. I just stopped answering. The calls came. Once a week, then once a month, then quarterly. Always the same tone. Never an apology. Always a request dressed up as concern. I let them ring. Cutting contact wasn't a punishment. It was a tourniquet. I'd been bleeding out from a wound they kept insisting didn't exist, and the only way to heal was to stop standing in the place where I kept getting cut. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who should have been your foundation, you know that silence after the last call. It's not peace. Not yet. It's the first breath after holding your head underwater. But what happened with the numbers is what changed everything. Stay with me. Derek and I got married 3 months later at the Bibb County Courthouse. Total cost, $1,847. My dress came from a consignment shop on Cherry Street. Ivory lace, slightly too long, perfect. Derek wore the one suit he owned and a tie his mentor Walt knotted for him in the parking lot. Our witnesses were my college friend Emma and Walt, a retired contractor who'd taught Derek everything about load-bearing walls and clean joints. We had lunch at Hernandez Diner on Forsyth Street. chicken fried steak, sweet tea. Derek carved our initials into the wooden booth with his pocket knife while the waitress pretended not to notice. That same week, Derek closed on a foreclosure, a 3-bedroom ranch on Jeffersonville Road. Purchase price, $62,000. Buckled floors, rotted porch columns, a kitchen that smelled like wet carpet, and regret. Derek looked at it the way a surgeon looks at a patient, already seeing what it could be. Our plan was simple. He'd renovate. I'd manage the money. First flip. I set up the spreadsheet that night, cost projections, timeline, comparable sales within a 5-mile radius. Derek sketched the renovation on graph paper at the kitchen table while I ran the numbers on my laptop. Other couples register for China, I told him. He smiled. We registered for a circular saw and a business license. 4 months later, we sold that house for $131,000, $41,000 in profit. Our first return on investment. I filed the capital gains. Derek was already looking at the next property. The partnership that would change our lives had officially begun. Vanessa's wedding happened on a Saturday in September. I wasn't invited. Emma went. She called me afterward, choosing her words carefully the way you do when you're describing someone else's party to the person who wasn't asked. Lake Sinclair venue, 214 guests, live band that flew in from Nashville, orchids that wilted by the reception because nobody accounted for the Georgia humidity. Final cost, $87,000. My father gave a toast about investing in the future. I imagine he believed it. Meanwhile, Derek and I were closing on our second flip, a brick duplex off Pio Nono Avenue. Purchase, $71,000. Renovation, $34,000. Sale, $158,000. Profit, $53,000. My sister spent $100,000 on one night. Derek and I made $53,000 in 8 weeks. I didn't keep score, but I'm a CPA. Numbers live in my head whether I invite them or not. Emma mentioned something else. Bradley had leased a new BMW the week before the wedding. To match the energy, he told people at the reception, $740 a month for a car he didn't own, to impress people he'd forget by Christmas. I didn't judge. I just filed it away the way I file everything, under patterns likely to compound. Derek and I spent that September Saturday, not at a wedding, but at a foreclosure auction in Warner Robins. We lost the bid by $2,000, drove home, ate leftover chili, and went to bed early. The hardware store had started bleeding by then, but nobody told me, and I didn't ask. 7 months after I walked out of Henderson Hardware, my mother's number appeared on my phone. I was sitting in my car outside a property inspection, eating a granola bar and reviewing a contractor's bid. I answered. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or the ghost of a girl who still wanted her mother to say the right words. Janet didn't say hello. Your father's back is acting up, she said. He can't do inventory alone. And the new bookkeeper. She made some errors on the quarterly filing. The IRS is asking questions. We might owe penalties. I waited. Counted the seconds in my head. 3, 5, 8. No. How are you? No. We miss you. No. I'm sorry about what happened. My mother called me like you call a wrench. I told Derek later. Only when there's a leak. I hope you find someone to help, I said into the phone. I'm not available. Silence. Then. You're really going to let your family struggle over some pride? It's not pride, Mom. It's a boundary. I hung up. Set the phone on the passenger seat. Stared at the contractor's bid until the numbers stopped swimming. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. 8 years of conditioning doesn't dissolve in 7 months. The guilt reflex fired. Sharp, familiar, trained. My hands wanted to reach for the laptop and pull up their QuickBooks file. Derek was waiting at home. He saw my face the moment I walked in. They called for your skills, he said. Not for you. He was right. And the difference between those two things was the difference between being family and being useful. I'd spent 8 years confusing the two. Year 1 closed and I ran the numbers the way I run everything, precisely. 3 flips completed, Total profit, $127,000, net of taxes, fees, materials, and the one plumbing disaster that taught Derek to always check the main line before demo day. I filed the paperwork for Morrison Property Group LLC on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Sarah Morrison. I'd taken Derek's name, and seeing it on a business license felt like planting a flag. Derek handled design, construction, subcontractor management. I handled financing, permits, accounting, tenant screening, insurance, and everything else that required a calculator and patience. We found a retired couple selling a small property management company. 6 rental units across Macon, mostly Section 8 tenants who paid on time and just wanted working plumbing. Purchase price, $340,000, financed through a local credit union. I structured the deal so it was cash flow positive from month 1. The math was clean. Derek builds houses, I build plans. Together, we were building something neither of us could have built alone. That spring, we found the land. 5 acres outside city limits, rolling hills, a stand of mature live oaks along the ridge, $78,000. Derek walked the property line and didn't say anything for 10 minutes. Then, this is where we build our home. I started keeping a personal ledger around that time. Not for the business, I had QuickBooks for that. This one was different. I went back through 8 years of Henderson hardware files, my copies, my backups, my records, and cataloged every hour I'd worked, every tax return, every vendor negotiation, every payroll cycle. I priced each task at market rate. I wasn't building a case. I was looking for clarity. 13 months after I stopped answering my parents' calls, Vanessa called. I was in the middle of a tenant screening. Background check, credit report, employment verification. Careful work. The kind of work you do when you understand that who you let in determines everything. I picked up because the number was Vanessa's, and she'd never called me before. Not once in 13 months. Sarah. Her voice was tight. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time. Like bad. The store's in trouble. I waited for the question I needed to hear. How are you? How's Derek? How's your life? It didn't come. Dad hired some bookkeeper off Craigslist. She messed up the payroll taxes. Something about misclassifying the part-timers as independent contractors. He owes the IRS $23,000 in penalties. $23,000. I could have caught that in a single afternoon. Vanessa, I said. That sounds stressful. I hope Dad gets it sorted. Silence. Then sharper. You could fix this. You know their system. You built their system. I used to, I said. I don't anymore. She didn't ask what I did now. Didn't ask about the business, the properties, the life I'd built in the same town where she still lived and never visited. My sister called me the way you call tech support. Skip the pleasantries, describe the error, expect a fix. You're being selfish, she said. No, Vanessa. I'm being employed. The difference is that one of those comes with a paycheck. I hung up, set the phone down, went back to the background check. Some patterns are obvious in the data. Vanessa had always treated me as a resource, not a sister. And resources don't get invited to weddings. They get called when something breaks. I found the number on a Tuesday in October. I was organizing my home office, the second bedroom that doubled as Morrison Property Group's nerve center, and pulled the personal ledger from the filing cabinet. 47 pages. Every entry dated. Every hour logged. I'd started it as an exercise in clarity, but what I found was something else entirely. 8 years of bookkeeping, quarterly tax preparation, annual filings with the Georgia Department of Revenue, payroll management for 3 employees, vendor invoice reconciliation, insurance renewal negotiations, accounts receivable tracking, cash flow forecasting. I priced each service at the going rate for a licensed CPA in Middle Georgia. Quarterly bookkeeping, $12,000 a year. Tax preparation, $4,000. Payroll management, $6,000. Vendor negotiations and cost savings. Variable, but I'd documented every dollar saved. The lumber supplier overcharge, the insurance renegotiation, the equipment lease I restructured in year 5 that saved them $1,800 annually. The total sat at the bottom of page 47. $247,300. That's what 8 years of free labor looks like when you finally run the invoice. I stared at the number for a long time. My parents gave Vanessa $100,000 for a wedding. They told me I didn't deserve help. And the whole time, I'd been subsidizing their survival to the tune of $250,000. I closed the ledger, put it back in the filing cabinet, didn't post about it, didn't call anyone. I told Derek that night. He looked at the number, looked at me. You were running their business, Sarah, for free, and they said you didn't deserve help. I know, but this isn't about what they owe me, it's about what I owe myself. I never used that ledger as a weapon. I didn't need to. Something changed after I found that number. Not overnight. More like the way a foundation settles. Slowly, permanently, until one morning you realize the house sits different. I stopped flinching when the 478 area code appeared on my phone. Stopped driving the long way through Riverside just to avoid Main Street and the Henderson Hardware sign. Stopped replaying my father's words at 3 a.m. when the house was quiet and my brain was loud. $247,000. The number set me free. Not because I'd use it, but because I finally had proof of what I'd always felt and couldn't name. I wasn't the daughter who didn't deserve help. I was the daughter who'd been helping all along. The business kept growing. Morrison Property Group closed on its 6th flip that month. A craftsman bungalow on College Street that Derek transformed from a sagging wreck into a 3-bedroom showpiece. We managed 12 rental units now. Annual revenue, $380,000. I hired our first employee, a part-time property inspector named Glenn, who reminded me of Walt. Derek and I broke ground on our house in November. He'd spent 4 months on the design. Modern farmhouse, wraparound porch, reclaimed wood beams from the houses we'd flipped, oak from the Jeffersonville Ranch, pine from the College Street bungalow, walnut from a duplex in East Macon. Every board had a story. Derek said that a lot. Every board has a story. Just like us. The framing went up before Christmas. I stood on the unfinished porch and watched the winter sun drop behind our oaks. I was building. Not to prove anyone wrong, not to make a point. Just to prove myself right. $247,000. That's the number that changed everything. Not because Sarah used it, but because she finally saw what she was worth in black and white. If you've ever wondered whether anyone noticed what you gave, stay with me. Because what happened when the person who held everything together walked away, that's the part you need to hear. Year 2 was the year the math stopped being impressive and started being undeniable. 8 flips completed. Average profit per flip, $42,000. Total flip income, $336,000 before taxes. 12 rental units generating $8,400 a month in net cash flow. 3 commercial renovation contracts signed, a dentist's office on Vineville, a barbershop on Broadway, and a co-working space in the old Cotton Warehouse district. Morrison Property Group's net worth crossed $1.2 million. No family money, no inheritance, no angel investor. Just a CPA's spreadsheet discipline and a carpenter's refusal to cut corners. The house was taking shape on the hill. Framing done, roof on, electrical rough-in complete. Derek installed the windows himself. He'd found a supplier in Vidalia who sold triple pane at contractor cost. I spent evenings on the plywood subfloor of what would become our porch, laptop balanced on a sawbuck, reconciling accounts while Derek ran the table saw in the workshop behind us. When I was 24, I thought helping my family for free was an investment, I told him one night. Turns out the best investment I ever made was in a man with calloused hands and a clear conscience. He didn't look up from the baseboard he was routing. You're the one who made the numbers work. We both made it work. The community was noticing. We'd hired local contractors, sourced materials from area suppliers, sponsored the Macon Youth Baseball League. We were building something visible. The community fundraiser gala was coming up in the spring, the biggest annual event in town. Morrison Property Group was already on the invite list. I heard about the store the way you hear about most things in a small city, through someone who knows someone who saw the signs. Judy Clemens, our insurance agent, mentioned it during a policy review. Henderson Hardware's behind on their premiums. I had to send a cancellation notice last month. She didn't know I was a Henderson. I'd been a Morrison for 2 years. I didn't correct her. I made some calls. Quiet ones. A supplier I still knew from my bookkeeping days confirmed it. The store was in trouble. The replacement bookkeeper, the one hired off Craigslist for $45,000 a year, had compounded the payroll tax mess. Missed quarterly estimated payments. Misfiled supplier invoices. Double paid 2 vendors. Total damage over 18 months. $67,000 in penalties and overpayments. Richard's herniated disc had gotten worse. He was down to 4 hours a day at the store, most of it sitting on a stool behind the register grimacing. Janet, 58, was working the floor full-time for the first time in 20 years. She looked exhausted every time someone mentioned her to me. And Vanessa? Bradley? Too busy. Bradley's commission checks were going to car payments and credit card minimums. Vanessa was helping by posting the store's inventory on Instagram. 12 followers, 0 sales. I'd written about this. In my resignation letter. Paragraph 3. Without consistent financial oversight, vendor relationships and tax compliance will deteriorate within 12 to 18 months. I hadn't written it to be cruel. I'd written it because I'm a CPA. Forecasting risk is the job. Every number I'd predicted had landed. The store was bleeding exactly the way the spreadsheet said it would, and the person who could have stopped the hemorrhage was sitting on a hilltop outside town, building a house with the man they said wasn't enough. Richard showed up at our office on a Thursday afternoon. Morrison Property Group operated out of a converted storefront on 2nd Street. Glass front, clean signage, 3 desks inside. I was reviewing a contractor's change order when the bell chimed and my father walked in. First time seeing him in 22 months. He was thinner, walking with a cane. The disc had gotten bad enough for one, but his jaw was set the same way it always was. The jaw that said he was right, and the world would eventually agree. He glanced around the office, the framed business license on the wall, the property listings on the corkboard, Glenn at his desk running comparable sales. "You need to come back and help with the books," Richard said. No greeting. Family helps family. I stayed seated. Family also shows up to each other's weddings, Dad. He blinked. Whatever script he'd rehearsed in the car, that line wasn't in it. That was different. We were trying to protect you from... From what? I gestured at the office, the glass walls, the organized desks, the employees visible behind me. From building this? He stood there. The cane trembled slightly. Whether from anger or the disc, I couldn't tell. I didn't come here to argue. I came because we need help. I needed help too, I said. 3 years ago, you looked at me and said... I stopped. I didn't repeat the words. I didn't need to. They were already in the room, louder than either of us. He turned and walked out. The bell chimed again. Glenn looked up. Everything okay? Yes, I said. He came for my skills. Not for me. I picked up the change order and went back to work. Some columns don't reconcile. You close the account and move on. Vanessa and Bradley separated 22 months after the orchids wilted. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from Emma, who heard it from a mutual friend, who heard it from Vanessa's hairdresser. Small towns have a faster data transfer rate than fiber optic. The details came in fragments. Bradley's spending had accelerated after the wedding. Leased BMW at $740 a month. Weekend trips to Hilton Head on credit. A $15,000 watch for the brand. Their joint credit card debt. $43,000. The dealership cut his territory in half after a bad quarter. The BMW went back. The watch went to a pawn shop on Eisenhower. Vanessa moved back into our parents' house. The childhood bedroom with the lavender walls and the poster of a sunset she'd bought at TJ Maxx when she was 17. 29 years old, sleeping in a twin bed, scrolling through the wedding photos on her phone. My parents invested $100,000 in my sister's future. 22 months later, that future was folded into a garment bag in a closet and filed under Lessons Learned. I didn't feel satisfaction. That surprised me. I'd expected some kind of vindication, a dark thrill, a private fist pump. Instead, I felt something closer to recognition. Vanessa wasn't my enemy. She was a product of the same system that tried to consume me. The difference was, she'd let it. The safe investment, the one my father chose over me, had cratered. The risky bet, the carpenter and the CPA, was building a house on a hill. I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't send a message. I just kept building. The best response to people who underestimated you isn't revenge. It's a permit, a poured foundation, and 12 months of compounding returns. Our house was finished in March. I remember the exact day because Derek carried me over the threshold and I cracked my head on the doorframe and we both laughed so hard we ended up sitting on the porch steps eating cold pizza at sunset. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2,800 square feet on 5 acres. Modern farmhouse. The kind of place that looks like it's been there for generations even though every nail is new. Reclaimed wood beams in the living room. Oak from our first flip on Jeffersonville Road. Handmade kitchen cabinets that Derek built over 3 weekends, sanded until the grain glowed like river stone. Stone fireplace Derek laid himself from fieldstone we collected on the property. Wraparound porch wide enough for a table, 10 chairs, and the rocking chair Walt gave us as a housewarming gift. Appraised value, $2.1 million. Land, $78,000. Construction cost, $410,000. Because when your husband does 60% of the labor, the math is different. Location premium, craftsmanship premium, and 5 acres of Georgia hillside did the rest. I walked through the kitchen alone one morning before Derek was awake. Ran my hand along the countertop he'd installed. Butcher block from a reclaimed bowling alley in Milledgeville. Every surface in this house was touched by his hands. Every number in our business was run through mine. My parents said Derek didn't have a real career. They were wrong about a lot of things. But that was the one I thought about most, standing in a house that proved them wrong without saying a word. We hosted our first dinner that weekend. Emma, Walt, Glenn, 2 of our subcontractors and their wives, 12 chairs around the table. I'd built a dining room for 12. My parents had one with a seat they didn't save for me. Macon is 155,000 people, but the circles that matter are small. Church pews, PTA meetings, the register line at Henderson Hardware, or what was left of it. Word traveled. The Morrisons built a house outside town. Big one. Up on the hill past the county road. Derek Morrison, that carpenter everyone used to call the bankruptcy kid. And his wife, Sarah Henderson. Wait. Henderson? Like the hardware store? Like Richard and Janet Henderson? People started connecting the dots. Morrison Property Group was visible, hiring local contractors, sponsoring youth sports, buying materials from suppliers across the county. The name was on job sites, on signs, on sponsorship banners at the baseball fields. Meanwhile, Henderson Hardware looked like a slow exhale. Inventory thinned out. The shelves that once held every bolt and bracket in Middle Georgia now had gaps, visible spaces where product used to be. Richard was absent most days. A help-wanted sign had been in the window for 3 months. Customers started driving to Home Depot in Warner Robins instead. At Macon First Baptist, where the Henderson family had sat in the 3rd pew for 2 decades, Janet's church friends started asking questions. "How's Sarah doing? We heard she built that beautiful place on the hill." Janet's response was always the same. Tight smile, quick subject change, redirect to the church bake sale. One neighbor, Mrs. Talbot, a retired school teacher who'd known both of us since kindergarten, said it directly. "Janet, you must be so proud of Sarah. Building all that from scratch. Self-made?" Janet's face tightened into something that wasn't a smile. She excused herself to the restroom and didn't come back for 15 minutes. My mother spent 30 years building a reputation as the perfect family woman. My absence was the crack that let the light in. Janet called me on a Sunday evening, first time in over a year. The caller ID stopped my heart for half a second, the way it used to, back when I still hoped every call might start with, "I'm sorry." "People are talking," she said. Her voice was thin, controlled. The voice she used when she was managing a situation. "They think we abandoned you." "You didn't abandon me, Mom," I said. "You just chose someone else." Silence. Then, "That's not fair, Sarah. We were worried about Derek. We wanted what was best for you. What was best for me was being seen, being valued, being included. You said you could only pour your hearts into one celebration." The words landed. I heard her breath catch. The sound of someone recognizing their own words thrown back with precision. "We didn't mean it like, you meant it exactly like that, and I built my life around that truth." She switched tactics. The pivot was smooth. She'd been managing narratives for 30 years. "Vanessa is going through a terrible time. Bradley left her with all that debt. She could really use her sister right now." "Vanessa has her family," I said. "You made that very clear at her engagement party." The call ended. I set the phone on the kitchen counter, the butcher block counter Derek installed, and stared out the window at the oaks. I didn't cry. Not because I was tough, because I'd already done my crying, years of it. Quiet crying in my car after family dinners, silent crying in the shower after being overlooked, controlled crying at my desk after running numbers that proved what I already knew. There's a difference between grieving your family and grieving the idea of one. I'd finished grieving the idea a long time ago. The Macon Community Fundraiser was the biggest social event of the year, a gala at the Civic Center supporting the local food bank and youth programs, white tablecloths, silent auction, 200 guests from every corner of the community, teachers, business owners, city council members, church deacons, and every family that had ever mattered in this town. Linda Prescott, the event organizer, called me in February. "Morrison Property Group has done so much for Macon this year," she said. "We'd be honored to have you and Derek as our presenting sponsors." I said yes, not to make a statement, because I cared about the community I'd chosen to build in. Derek and I had sponsored the Youth Baseball League, hired local contractors, partnered with Habitat for Humanity on a renovation project. This wasn't performance. It was who we were. Henderson Hardware had been a fundraiser sponsor for 15 years. This year, they could barely afford the table tickets. Word reached Janet. Sarah and Derek Morrison were the presenting sponsors, Janet told Richard. Richard stared at the floor. Vanessa, who'd moved back home, who was still untangling Bradley's debt, found out through Instagram. "She's going to show off," Vanessa told Janet. "She's doing this to humiliate us." I heard about this later, through the network of polite whispers that governs small city life. It didn't surprise me. When you've spent your life being the center of attention, everyone else's success feels like a spotlight aimed at your flaws. My family assumed my success was about them. It wasn't. But I understood why they thought so. The fundraiser was in 3 weeks. My parents, my sister, and I would be in the same room for the first time in 3 years. I ironed my dress and didn't think about it again until the night arrived. 2 weeks before the fundraiser, Vanessa drove past our house. She was making deliveries for the store. A special order shipment of cabinet hardware for a customer out past the county line. The route went right along the road that borders our property. I wasn't home. Derek was in the workshop cutting trim for a client's bathroom renovation. He heard a car slow down, then stop. He looked up and saw a silver Honda parked at the end of our driveway. Engine running. A woman inside, gripping the steering wheel. Then her phone came up to her ear, and she started crying. Derek didn't recognize her. He went back to work. He told me about it that evening, and I knew. "That was Vanessa," I said. He paused. "Your sister drove out here?" "She was making deliveries. The route goes past us." I imagined what she saw. The house rising from the hillside. White clapboard, dark shutters. A porch wrapped around 3 sides. Landscaped gardens that a client's wife helped me plant. The workshop. The gravel drive lined with magnolias we'd transplanted from a demolition site in East Macon. All of it built with our hands and our planning. Built by the sister who married a mistake. Built by the carpenter who didn't have a real career. $2.1 million of the future my father refused to fund. Emma called me later that night. Vanessa called your mom crying. She kept saying, "How does she have that? How does Sarah have a house like that?" Janet didn't answer, because the answer was the kind of math even she couldn't rearrange. Sarah has that because she's Sarah. And you dismissed her. The fundraiser was in 14 days. All three of them had decided to come. The Macon Civic Center on a warm April evening. White tablecloths, centerpieces with magnolias, a silent auction along the east wall. 200 guests filing in through double doors. The kind of event where everyone knows everyone and the seating chart is a political document. Derek and I arrived at 6:30. I wore a navy dress. Simple. No labels. Derek wore his one good blazer and a tie I bought him at the consignment shop where I found my wedding dress. He tugged at the collar every 30 seconds. My parents were already there. Table 14, near the back. Richard in a suit jacket that hung looser than it used to. Janet with her church smile. The one that covered everything. Vanessa beside them, in a dress I recognized from the boutique where she used to work. Employee discount. Still had the tag crease at the neck. The room noticed us the way rooms notice when the two halves of a known story are finally in the same space. Whispers, quick glances. The polite choreography of people choosing sides while pretending they're not. I found our table. Table 3, near the stage. Presenting sponsors. We sat down. Derek squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. Vanessa intercepted me near the refreshment table 10 minutes later. "Nice of you to show up where you're not wanted," she said. Quiet enough that only I could hear. "I was invited, Vanessa. I was asked to sponsor." "You're only here to make us look bad." I looked at my sister, 29 years old, living in our parents' house, drowning in her ex-husband's debt, wearing a dress from a job she no longer held. "I'm here because I believe in this community," I said, the same way I believed in our family, until our family made it clear the feeling wasn't mutual. Linda Prescott took the stage at 7:15. She thanked the volunteers, the donors, the committee members. Then she got to the sponsors. "This year's presenting sponsor is a couple who embodies everything this fundraiser is about," she said, adjusting the microphone. "They came to Macon with nothing but a business plan and a set of hand tools. In 3 years, they've flipped 8 homes, created jobs for a dozen local workers, and built one of the most respected property companies in Middle Georgia. Please join me in thanking Derek and Sarah Morrison of Morrison Property Group." The room stood. 200 people. Teachers who'd taught me in high school. Business owners who'd seen our signs on job sites. Church members who'd watched the Henderson family sit in the third pew for 20 years, standing, applauding, for the daughter they were told didn't deserve help. I stood, nodded, sat back down. Derek did the same. No speech, no wave, just acknowledgement. Across the room, my family sat. Richard stared at his plate, the tendons in his neck drawn tight. Janet's smile was frozen, the kind of expression that takes every muscle in your face to hold. Vanessa's eyes glistened. She wiped them with a cocktail napkin she'd been shredding. Throughout the dinner, people came to our table. Not a stream, but a steady current. "We're so glad you and Derek are part of this community. Your renovations on Broadway are beautiful. My son applied for a job with your company. He said the interview was the most professional he'd ever had." Each compliment landed like a line item on a ledger I'd never have to show anyone. Table 14, the Hendersons, remained quiet. Not because people were cruel, because people pay attention to who builds up and who tears down. And 200 people had been watching. Richard found me during the silent auction. The crowd had dispersed through the East Wing, bidding on gift baskets and weekend getaways. I was reading the description on a framed watercolor of the Ocmulgee River when he appeared beside me. He smelled like aftershave and something else. The faint metallic sharpness of a man running on adrenaline and very little sleep. "You've made your point," he said. Low, controlled. The voice he used when he was negotiating with suppliers. "Now stop making us look bad." I didn't turn to face him. I kept reading the painting's description. "I'm not making you look like anything, Dad. I'm living my life. We gave your sister that money because she needed it more. She didn't have your skills." I turned then. Looked at him. Really looked. He was 61 years old. His back was bad. His store was dying. His favorite daughter's marriage had failed. And he was standing in front of the daughter he dismissed, asking her to shrink so he could feel tall. "I needed it too," I said. "Maybe not the money, but the belief, the faith. The same faith you gave Vanessa without a second thought. I was trying to protect you from what? From building a $2 million company? From hiring 12 people? From standing in this room as the presenting sponsor of the fundraiser you used to sponsor?" His mouth opened, closed. He had no script for this. For 30 years, his authority had been the final word in every conversation. Now he was standing in front of someone whose numbers were bigger, whose reputation was stronger, and whose voice was calmer. He turned and walked back to table 14. Janet watched him sit down. Vanessa watched him stare at the tablecloth. The room watched everything. It happened 8 minutes later. I was back at my table, talking with Derek about bidding on the watercolor, when the room shifted. That specific silence, the one that drops over a crowd when something private becomes public. Janet was walking toward us. Not fast, deliberate. Her heels clicking on the civic center floor like a metronome counting down. She stopped 3 feet from our table. Close enough that I could see the mascara already starting to bleed at the corners of her eyes. "You're punishing us." Her voice was loud enough for the tables around us to hear. Then louder. "You built this whole life just to throw it in our faces. You're showing off your house and your business to humiliate us." I stood up, slowly. The way you stand when you want someone to see that you're not afraid. "Mom, I didn't build my life to punish you. I built it because you told me I was on my own. So I went on my own. We sacrificed everything for this family." Janet's voice cracked. "I gave up my career. Your father gave up his health for that store, and you just walked away." "You sacrificed for the family you chose," I said. "I wasn't part of that family. You told me that at Vanessa's engagement party. You told me that when Dad said those words at the dinner table. You don't get to be angry that I listened." Vanessa was behind Janet now. She'd crossed the room on autopilot, drawn by the gravity of the scene. "You always had to be better than everyone," she said. "You always had to prove something." I looked at my sister. "I didn't have to be better, Vanessa. I just had to survive without you." The room was silent. 200 people watching a family fracture in real time. Plates untouched. Conversations abandoned. Every eye in the Macon Civic Center trained on a mother, 2 daughters, and 30 years of buried inequality finally breaking the surface. Richard didn't stand. Didn't walk over. He sat at table 14 with his hands folded, staring at the tablecloth like a man reading a verdict he already knew. Janet's voice broke. "You don't know what it's like to watch your daughter walk away." "You're right," I said. "I don't know what it's like to watch a daughter walk away. I only know what it's like to be the daughter who had to." I sat down. Derek took my hand. I didn't leave, didn't storm out, didn't deliver a parting shot. I returned to my seat and my dinner and my life. The confrontation was over. Not because I won, because there was nothing left to prove. The Hendersons left at 8:45. Janet first, walking fast toward the exit with her purse clutched to her chest. Vanessa behind her, head down. Richard last, moving slowly with his cane, pausing at the double doors to look back at the room one more time before stepping into the parking lot. The gala continued. The band played. The silent auction closed. And one by one, people found their way to my table. A former neighbor named Mrs. Talbot. The retired teacher who'd taught both Vanessa and me sat in the empty chair beside me. "We always wondered why you stopped coming around," she said. "Now we understand." A church deacon named Harold shook Derek's hand. "Your wife's mother told everyone Sarah moved away for work. We didn't know the truth." A woman I barely recognized, turned out she was my 9th grade English teacher, touched my arm. "I taught both you girls. I always knew you were the steady one. I'm sorry I never said it when it counted." I thanked each of them. Meant it every time. Outside, in the parking lot, Richard sat alone in his truck. Janet and Vanessa had already driven home. He gripped the steering wheel the way Derek said Vanessa had gripped hers 2 weeks earlier, parked in front of our house. Different driveway, same grip. He whispered something. I'll never know exactly what. But Emma's husband, who was parked 2 rows over, heard fragments through the open window. I was trying to protect her. He believed it. He'd always believe it. But sitting alone in that parking lot while 200 people stood and applauded his daughter, the one he said didn't deserve help. Richard Henderson knew for the first time that intentions don't matter when the damage is already done. He started the engine and drove home alone. The gala ended at 10. Derek and I were the last sponsors to leave. We'd stayed to help Linda's team stack chairs and break down the auction tables. Old habits? The parking lot was mostly empty. April air, warm and thick. Cicadas tuning up in the tree line. Janet was standing by the exit. I don't know how long she'd been there. Her mascara was gone. She'd cleaned up in the restroom. But her eyes were swollen, and she stood the way people stand when they've been rehearsing something for an hour and still don't know if they'll get the words right. "Come home for dinner," she said. "Sunday. We can try to fix this. We can be a family again." I looked at my mother, the woman who erased my name from a toast, who told me they could only pour their hearts into one celebration, who called me when the books broke but never when my birthday came, who spent 3 years telling church friends I'd moved away for work. I loved her. I'd always love her. But love and access are different accounts. "I am home, Mom," I said. "I've been home for 3 years. You just never came to visit." Her face crumpled. "I didn't know where you lived. You didn't ask." We stood there for a moment, 2 women separated by 10 feet of concrete and 3 years of choices that couldn't be unchosen. Then Derek took my hand, and we walked to the truck. I didn't close the door on my mother that night. I just stopped pretending it was open. The engine turned over. The headlights swept across the parking lot, catching Janet still standing by the exit, arms wrapped around herself. Derek pulled onto the county road. Georgia crickets filled the silence. I watched the Civic Center shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared. The fallout arrived the way compound interest does. Quietly at first, then all at once. Henderson Hardware went up for sale 4 weeks after the fundraiser. 22 years of bolts and brackets and my father's pride, listed with a commercial broker on Cherry Street. A regional chain bought the location for $160,000, $80,000 less than the building was worth. Richard signed the papers in a broker's office without ceremony. No toast. No speech about investing in the future. Just a pen, a notary, and the end of a legacy that I'd kept solvent for 8 years without a thank you. Vanessa moved to Atlanta in June, took a job at a home goods chain, register work, $9.50 an hour, a studio apartment in Decatur that she shared with a girl she met on a roommate app. She was 29 years old, rebuilding from a credit score in the low 500s and $43,000 of debt her ex-husband left behind like a parting gift. Janet sat alone in the 3rd pew at Macon First Baptist the following Sunday. Richard didn't come. His back was bad enough now for a referral to a surgeon in Atlanta, and the drive was too long for a Sunday round trip. The church friends who once envied the Henderson family, the stable husband, the pretty daughter, the 22-year business, didn't approach Janet after the service. Not out of cruelty. Out of the particular awkwardness that comes when everyone knows the story and nobody knows what to say. 3 years of my silence had cost my family their store, their reputation, and the narrative they'd built around themselves. I didn't cause any of it. I just stopped preventing it. There's a difference between revenge and withdrawal. Revenge takes energy. Withdrawal just takes the truth. My life continued the way well-built things do, steady, functional, improving with time. Morrison Property Group hit 25 rental properties by fall. 8 full-time employees. Revenue on track for $1.4 million. Derek was designing a community workshop for veterans. Free classes in carpentry and home repair, funded by our company and hosted in the warehouse we'd renovated on Broadway. I planted a vegetable garden behind the house. Tomatoes, zucchini, basil, snap peas on a trellis. Derek welded from salvaged rebar. Mornings, I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the fog lift off the hills. The oaks were taller than when we'd bought the land. Or maybe I was just paying more attention. I didn't post on social media, didn't give interviews, didn't drive past the building that used to be Henderson Hardware. It was a fast serve now, with fluorescent signage and a parking lot where the garden section used to be. A letter arrived on a Tuesday in October. Plain, white envelope. My father's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere after 8 years of reading his notes in the margins of vendor invoices. I opened it standing at the mailbox, with the afternoon sun warm on my shoulders. I was wrong. That was all. No explanation, no context, no request, no conditions, no return address, even though I knew exactly where he lived. Just that. Blue ink on a folded piece of notebook paper. I read it twice, carried it inside, sat with it at the kitchen table for a long time, running my thumb along the crease. Then I put it in the filing cabinet. Same drawer as the ledger, same drawer as the life I'd accounted for and moved past. Forgiving my father wasn't something I owed him. It was something I'd give myself when I was ready, and I wasn't ready yet. Some accounts take longer to reconcile than others, and some balance sheets never fully close. The people who told me I didn't deserve help gave me the greatest gift they could. The certainty that everything I built, every wall, every number, every morning on this porch, was mine. Built by my hands and the hands of the man they said wasn't enough. $100,000 for a wedding that lasted 22 months. $250,000 in free labor that nobody acknowledged. A $2 million home built with a carpenter's hands and a CPA's discipline. And a family that learned, too late, that the person they dismissed was the one holding everything together. If you've ever been the one they looked past, the one they said didn't deserve a seat at the table, you already know how this feels. You know the silence after you stop trying, and you know the sound of your own life getting louder once theirs gets quiet. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Leave a comment if you've ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't save you a chair. And subscribe to Calm Drama Stories, because every story here is for the ones who kept going.